Welcome back to Common Ground, an inside look at Suffolk County. I'm your host, Suffolk County Sheriff Steve Tompkins. Now, on this side of the program, we've got two extraordinary ladies that run two extraordinary organizations. Well, one is still running, and one is the founder of, but she won't go away, so she actually really is still running that. And that would be Dr. Valerie Batts, and of Visions. Your organization is Visions, Inc., and Miss Lyn Levy, and SPAN, Inc., and I know a lot of you know SPAN. And so what we're going to do first, ladies, and I'll start with you, Dr. Batts, let's talk about what Visions is set up to do.
Yes, Visions is set up to create environments where differences are recognized, understood, appreciated, and utilized.
Okay.
And we work, so it's organizational development from a multicultural perspective.
Okay.
And it's focused on shifting how power works in organizations.
Right.
And so we work.
All organizations or just nonprofits?
Mostly nonprofits, but
Okay.
we work across the spectrum.
Okay.
And our interface with criminal justice, for instance, came as we worked once with the Suffolk County DA's office.
Okay.
To look at the issue of, if you see an issue like disparate sentencing.
Right.
How do you look at what part does unconscious bias, what part does racism play in questions like that? That's
Right.
what those organizations who are struggling with those questions
Right.
seek us out. We started in 1984 when people thought we had solved this problem, that we were in a post-racial society.
Yeah,
right?
how about that?
Right,
Huh?
and,
Okay.
and as we speak now, we
Right.
see that that's not true.
That's right.
But our work over these 30 years has been to look at the unconscious and often unintentional ways in which the legacy of racism and other forms of oppression and discrimination continue. And our work looks at how do you change that, both at the personal level and at the institutional level and at the cultural level within organizations.
Now, Lyn, talk to us about SPAN and what its mission is, and how long have you been doing it? How long ago did you found the organization, and what is its mission?
Well, I founded SPAN in 1976, in July, actually. I think it was even July 26th. And the agency was put together for the purpose of working with men and women who were coming out of incarceration.
Okay.
So we began to work and develop programs to go inside the facilities. We started in the state system at MCI Concord, and to begin to develop relationships with people who were going to be coming home soon, and then follow those relationships through in the community to support and assist people who are coming out to make a good, healthy, strong transition.
So, Dr. Batts, tell us, this is interesting, the two organizations and what your respective missions are. How is it that you're both sitting at this table with me today? Talk to us about that intersection of
Yes.
what you do and what your organization does.
Yes, well, the reason that we're together actually has to do with the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute. Please. Tina Sherry, as you know, is the founder of the Institute. And from my connection to the Institute is twofold. When we moved into Roxbury, it was the 5th year of the Mother's Day March that weekend.
Okay.
And we went to the march because I grew up in the South, and when there's a march for peace, you go.
Gotcha.
So I had no idea what it was about, but I knew I would be there.
Right.
And in the context of my professional role, Roxbury was starting an initiative called Cherishing Our Hearts and Souls, which was looking at health disparities. And public health and gun violence was one of the issues that we were looking at.
Okay.
And so Tina and I sat together in a collaborative for several years. And so the link between the march and the professional work of ending gun violence, seeing it as a public health issue, understanding that it links to economic and social justice, brought us to a partnership with the Peace Institute.
Okay.
So that part of the work we were doing have been doing with the Peace Institute for the last 10 years or so has been helping victims, survivors and victims see that this is not just a personal issue, but it's also a social issue. So as we continue to do that work, Tina introduced me to Lyn, who she was working with on the issue on how to bring together the families of offenders and ex-offenders and the families of victims. And again, helping in that whole circle, looking at the social and political implications of all of this work. So people don't just see this as a personal issue and I have my personal grief, but this is part of a much larger issue. Being in prison, whether you're in prison or coming out of prison, or whether you are recovering from having lost a loved one, there's much that you share and we are working to try to bring that together. So that's how we came together.
And so SPAN, given that that's principally your mission and had been for so many years, it sounds like that was a natural fit for what was being accomplished
It
by
was
the
totally
Peace
fit.
Institute.
Absolutely.
Now, talk to me
Absolutely.
about the Intergenerational Justice Grant, I believe. Talk to us about that. What is that all about?
Well, the grant came as a result of some work we were doing based on the model that Tina experienced in her own life. And I would say at the outset that the work is the result of a person of remarkable courage and strength. The other reason that SPAN was involved with the work at the Peace Institute was to address, at Tina's request, some of the issues and concerns that folks had around what people coming out of incarceration were going through. And that started a series of dialogues, and out of that came a model that would bring together significant people who were involved in the same vicious cycle of violence, which is people who lose their lives or have their lives taken from them as a result of violence,
Right.
folks who commit a crime of violence, and the families and friends of both. That when someone goes to prison, they are lost to their families.
Right.
When someone is killed, obviously they're lost to their families, and there's an awful lot in common that people have that needs to be addressed. So that was what that was
Talk
about.
to us just a little bit. Just give us an example or two of what needs to be addressed, but equally as important, if not more important, how do you address some of these really some significant and painful, oftentimes, issues to try to make a person whole again?
I think that people make themselves whole with guidance and with support. And that is the biggest piece of what we do, is to encourage the folks that we're working with to face the experiences that they've had and to begin to process their way through them. And that sounds very complicated and formal, but it really means looking inside yourself and figuring out what you need to do differently so that you can function in the world and grow a better community.
And in the context of working with families who are recovering from losing a loved one,
Right.
there is a process by which the families need time and space in which to grieve. And often that involves looking at what did I do wrong.
Yeah.
People often take it personally.
I see.
And it also involves looking at how the grief can interrupt relationships between a couple or between parents and children. So helping the family reconstitute itself.
Right.
And think about how to move forward, how to grieve the loss and move on, which also means letting go of the resentment that is natural to have about the incident.
Right.
And that process is both a clinical process, but what we're adding is to say it's also that one of the ways that I can pay justice to my loved one is to work to change the system and structure that is actually creating this.
So you know what, it's interesting when you talk about changing a system. Now, we had that unfortunate incident a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, down in South Carolina, right, where this young man who claims to want to have begun a race riot by going into a church, a place of worship, and taking folks' lives, and the exact opposite of what he was trying to achieve, right, has happened, where the country is actually pulling together and they're pulling down flags and they're saying, this is not the way humane societies are supposed to interact with one another. I'm curious from your perspective, your thoughts on how one can set out to do something so heinous, but then have the bigger population say that, you know what, we're not going there with you and we're going to actually flip the script and go 180 degrees in a different direction.
Well, let's hope we go 180 degrees in a different direction. I think that I'm not convinced. I guess I thought, just to go back a bit, I thought when the Newtown killings happened that we would go in a different direction, and we didn't in terms of policy.
Right.
I think more and more people are clearer that we need to address the mental health issues, et cetera.
Right.
But the issue, I think, with this young man, how is it that a 21-year-old is still learning racial hatred? That is an issue that we all have to address.
Right.
And we, in our work, we say that change has to happen at the personal level, interpersonally, systemically, but culturally.
Right.
And we have such a culture of violence in the U.S. And people like you are working to interrupt that. My research in graduate school in the late 70s was about a concept called modern racism, which said that that modern racism is the covert acceptance of racism, and often people don't know, but that the old-fashioned form would rise up again when the climate was ambiguous.
Wow.
We proved that.
Wow. Yeah.
And you see it's happening now.
Yes, right.
Since President Obama has been in office,
Right.
post-racial society,
Right.
you see an increase in violence. And I think if you look at the Southern Poverty Law Center statistics, more and more hate crimes. So the old-fashioned issues have not been addressed, and they are rearing their ugly head. So my hope is that out of this tragedy, there will, in addition to, I think it's critical that we understand that the rebel flag has in it the message of black people being less than.
Yeah.
That is a clear change if we can keep that. And then the question becomes, how do we educate the next generations of young people and adults so that that issue of hate becomes much more minimal? I know you can probably never get rid of it all,
Right.
but we don't have a systemic approach to the kind of effective education and economic justice that would lead to a genuine change.
So, Lyn, let me ask you about that change. So there's an old saying that goes, our differences are our strengths, right? If there's any kernel of truth in that, how do we get to this systemic change so that people really do begin to see each other as human beings and not just as black or white or Latino or Asian? And the thing that really gives me pause is that with everything that's going on in the world, and we had the 3 attacks a week ago across on the other side of the globe, we as a nation need to come together because we don't know what's coming at us, and if we're so divided internally, how are we going to survive when the devil knocks at the door? So how do we bring our differences together in a way that we do become a stronger society? I know that might be a large question, but you're one of the smartest people I know, so I'm giving it to you.
Well, I would say this, that I think I'll bring it back to what's small, and what's small is the way we deal with people every day. And we've built systems in the United States that don't do that. We have built systems that thrive on separation, that thrive on exaggerating people's differences. And we have an opportunity when we're working with people, especially people who are coming out of incarceration. If we look at that as an example, we can say very, very easily that people should not be forced to pay for a mistake that they made for the rest of their natural born life.
Right.
And folks need to be given the 2 things, given the opportunity to grow their own lives, and then to develop the kind of aptitude, ability, and willingness to do that. And I think that is how change takes place. Change takes place when, as we look at, and we see it in our office all the time. The 2 men came into my office today, one of them African American, the other one Caucasian. Both had served 2nd-degree life sentences. Both knew each other from incredibly too much time that they had to do, walked into our office and gave each other a huge hug, sat down in the counseling room that we were working with, and started talking about their experiences and began to give each other some support and some guidance. One had been out longer than the other and was doing very, very well, and the communication was stunning. And we need to create those kinds of environments. We need to create places like the Peace Institute where people can come together and join together out of the horror of what people have been through, whether it's been the fact that you've served 22 years in prison, or whether it's the fact that 22 years ago you lost someone as a result of a homicide. That we should be able to address that, and we should be able to do that together. And it's always about people being able to talk to people.
We should be able to do it, but are we going to be able to do it? I mean, going back to your earlier point, after Newtown and the next and the next and the next incident, When do we finally get to? I mean, hopefully this is the one. When do we get there and say, okay, enough?
Well, I think in some ways we need to work locally and think globally. So we see this intergenerational justice program as one of the goals of this program is to help people, as we say, recognize, understand, and appreciate similarities and differences.
I like that.
Our differences are rich. We think about this as a salad bowl, right? All the ingredients are important.
Right.
And the program is focused on helping people see that, just as Lyn is saying, that we come to this table from different walks of life, different experiences, and each of those is valuable. And if we can learn to recognize what you bring and what I bring, you bring different things than what I bring.
Right.
And then we create a tapestry, that's the alternative. And that the US has, at the cultural level, created the myth, the melting pot myth, as if sameness was true. People are both alike and different. They say God didn't create us all in the same race, color, language for nothing.
Right.
So
Right.
I think we are an experiment in the history of the world. You talked about globally, right? We're an experiment. If we think of ourselves, we're growing up now.
Okay.
And growing up in the South in the 50s, when legalized segregation was the law of the land, I remember learning about the melting pot and saying, what about us?
Yeah. Right.
We knew there was a myth because we weren't in it. You saw it every day. So I never bought that idea. And so as I came to understand the politics of the US, there's always been those who were not considered in the pot.
Yeah.
So I think we can throw out the pot
Right.
and think about a salad bowl and think about how we can each be in.
Right, I got you.
Because when it comes to criminal justice, again, did you see this? Notice that the white young man in Charleston who committed that crime.
Right.
I understand that the police basically treated him like they would treat their son. They gave him some food.
I heard that, yes.
Yeah, think about Tamir Rice.
Yes.
Think about the young men that get shot here often.
Right.
So there is something in our hearts about, do we see each other fully as human beings? And the U.S. has work to do on that.
Lots.
And again, none of us in this time is to blame for that history. And it's like a germ in the cultural air.
Right.
And so we have to anesthetize ourselves. We have to take some anecdotes which allow us to see, how did I catch that this person is other rather than different in a way that I can learn from and grow with?
Right. Lyn, off air we were talking about an event that's coming up at UMass.
Yes.
Talk to us about that. What's that all about and when is it?
Well, it is the 28th
of July.
Thank you.
10 to
Of
12.
July from 10 to 12 at UMass, and it is celebrating the creation of this phenomenal project that we're working on that has such a crucial mission, and letting folks know that this is happening and that we want to grow and we want to learn from what other people are doing in the field. We want to share the work that's going on, and we want to invite people to participate. So it's a really wonderful opportunity for folks to come together who have commitment to try and address the.
And we're going to be in the context of this session, illustrating some of the tools and strategies that we use to help people see, help people come together and build trust and build understanding of similarities and differences. So
Is this an interactive between the audience and the folks?
There's going to be some interactive pieces in which people can get a feel for what we're just talking about, so that they can not just hear about it, but actually experience it.
Yeah.
And we really were wanting to bring together folks from every walk of life who are affected by gun violence in this neighborhood, which is all of us.
Yeah.
So everyone is invited, and it won't be just talking heads. It will be interactive in terms of what are the challenges and what are the opportunities. And we are also inviting people to bring tables or other ways of displaying what they are doing. And often you hear people say, what can we do about this? This is an opportunity to come and do something.
Yeah.
And to let other people
sounds
know
very
what you are
powerful.
doing,
Yeah.
so that we continue to build a movement back to, we can solve this in this neighborhood.
Yeah.
And then we go to the next neighborhood and the next and the next.
You know, and the thing that gives me pause when you talk about folks cycling out of jail, re-entering society, is how they got there in the first place. You know, and there are some folks that rightly so should be in jail. There are other folks that should be in a detox or mental health bed or discretionary program and not necessarily in jail. Briefly, and I'll start with you, Lyn. I'm just curious as to what you think about the elimination of the mandatory minimum sentences, whether or not that should go away, or what your thoughts are.
I think that we need to look at incarceration as the absolute last resort to address issues like substance abuse, like even violence, that we know, we have learned time after time after time that for most people a prison setting doesn't work if we're looking for behavioral change.
Right.
And I think so. My personal opinion is that any way we can tip our system upside down and have the smallest part of the system be at the top and the bottom be almost nothing,
Yeah.
I think we would be in much, much better shape all the way around.
I mean, Dr. Batts, we have this country, this nation, America, incarcerates more of its citizens than any nation on the planet, you know, and the thing that worries me is we're supposed to be the leaders of the free world. And how do we do that with so many of our citizens in jail? And then when you drill that down to its subset, when you look at folk of color, Latino and African American, you've got so many people there. And there are two things, there are a number of things that's wrong with that, but you know, the first two things that pop out is one, what happens to the family unit when you take mom or dad out of that family unit, if in fact they would be better served in a different type of a facility. And then the second thing is the cost.
Yes.
It's around $46,000 to $53,000 annually to incarcerate individuals. So on one side you got the deterioration of the family unit, on the other side you have society paying a boatload of money where those dollars could be used more meaningfully. I'm just curious as to what you think about how we get our arms around the fact that we can no longer continue to put so many people behind bars.
Well, I think that's why we need to see this as a public health issue. This is, and also the intersection with race. There is a sense that people who are put in prison are dispensable, and that the families of those people don't matter. And yet, we know, I mean, I started my undergraduate career, I took a course where we went to Central Prison in Raleigh. It had the largest number of youth offenders on death row of any place at the time. And we had a course there, and we went every Wednesday. Those were young men just like myself. Right. Two of them I had grown up with. You know, so it's like but if you don't see African Americans as human, you don't see these as beautiful people, right? So I think it links at the cultural and personal level to that, and at the systemic level, the cost of putting people away has now created another economic boondoggle for us to undo, and it takes away from all the things we could be doing in terms of providing jobs and safe families, safety in the streets, and learning opportunities, etc. So we have to see the link between that practice and oppression.
And so these are some of the issues that are going to be discussed.
And we want families to
be
engaged in this because we can, this is the other side, that we as people of color, we as those who've been historically excluded, we need to lead this. We need to say no more. We are not going to continue to vote for people who want to put people behind bars. We're not going to continue to support policies that break up our families. We're not, et cetera. So I think that's our.
Let me offer you this though. So as much as I do believe that race is very intimately involved in a lot of what we're talking about, so is the economics of the situation.
Class is absolutely
because
equally.
there are a number. There's a lot of poor white folks.
Poor white people too.
And,
no,
exactly.
Absolutely.
And they are at the bottom of that ladder.
I would agree.
And they are suffering. Now they may not be incarcerated, although some are. But if they can't put food on the table, clothes on their kids' back, get them educated in the proper way. And so that which was called the middle class, which is vanished or vanishing. So you've got everybody up top that's got maybe a little bit more, and then you've got all these folks down at the bottom. And so what's happened, at least in the way I see it, is the folks that are struggling to get more are now fighting against each other.
Exactly. You get set up to fight.
Exactly. And so it's not necessarily just the color of the skin, although that plays a part in furthering that discontent. But it really comes down to economics and how you can take care of yourself and take care of your loved ones. Would you agree?
I totally agree, and I think that we have created a situation where we're spending so much money to warehouse people. If we had treatment on demand for folks who had substance abuse problems, if we had mental health care that was appropriate and affordable and could reach out to people who needed it, spending $50,000 a year to lock someone up and come out with a worse product than when they went in is a heinous crime. It's a terrible waste of money. So it can work the other way.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. If folks want more information about the event on July 28th, can they go to Tina's website? How do they get more
They can
information?
go to the website of the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute.
Okay.
Yes, they can get more information. 10 to 12 on Tuesday, July 28th.
At UMass Boston.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you so much for coming
Thank
on,
you.
ladies. We
Thanks
really
for having
appreciate
us.
it. It was a great conversation. We'd
great.
love to have you back in the fall to continue this discussion and talk about the aftermath of the event on the 28th.
Let's do that.
great.
Okay?
Let's do that. All right,
Okay,
thank
great.
you.
All right, folks, look, we're out of time. We're out of here. We'll be back again next week. Until then, you take care of yourself. We'll see you soon. Peace.